Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take that fire hose of information you've collected and try to turn it into something that makes you the smartest and maybe the most paranoid person in the room.
Which is a fun combination.
It is. This is the start of a 5-part series we're calling The Trust Crash. And today we are going, straight into the heart of darkness. The hidden recipes that govern our collective reality.
And if you're already feeling a sense of creeping dread, then congratulations, you are paying attention. We're calling this first one The Algorithmic Secrets to Political Manipulation.
Because what's more fun than that?
Nothing. It's just, It's realizing that the core structures of modern democracy are now, well, they're just lines of hidden code. Optimized not for human flourishing, but for, outrage and engagement metrics.
Exactly. We're talking about the actual architecture of modern democratic destabilization. And you have to forget the old school boogeymen of propaganda. That stuff was analog, it was bulky, and frankly, pretty inefficient. We are talking about digital surgical strikes on your perception, constantly tailored, constantly personalized. And the true power brokers, they don't wear suits and meet in secret rooms on Jekyll Island to create the Federal Reserve.
Oh, here we go. Comparing central banking to clickbait. I'm exhausted already.
No, it's not a theory. It's a structural comparison. Think about it. Think about the origin story of centralized control.
Okay.
J.P. Morgan supposedly locks a handful of bankers in a private hunting lodge on Jekyll Island in 1910 until they invent a system that controls the nation's debt.
Right.
And they did it without a single public vote. They achieved this structural, unelected control over our finances.
An opaque power structure built on financial secrecy. Yes, I'm with you.
The Silicon Valley version is structurally identical, just, optimized for the 21st century. Instead of bankers, they lock a few sleep-deprived developers in a beanbag-filled room in Palo Alto.
With unlimited cold brew.
Until they invent a feature that, say, accidentally amplifies rage, breaks down societal consensus, and destroys democracy. And the kicker, they get stock options for it.
So one controls the value of your money, the other controls the value of your anger.
Precisely.
And your sources suggest this is not some, fringe phenomenon. We're talking about the YouTube recommender system, that secret recipe, which is responsible for an estimated 30% of all video views on the platform.
30%.
Think about that. 1 out of every 3 videos watched globally is chosen for you by an invisible, profit-driven editor. That is a massive, unelected structure governing what a third of the world consumes and believes.
It's the new secret society, and it's built on algorithms designed for engagement, not for truth. So before we dive into how that black box actually operates, we need to clarify the terms of battle. When we talk about this digital weapon, what exactly separates calculated, malicious disinformation from just regular internet weirdness?
Or a mistake,
Yeah, or a good old-fashioned mistake.
This is a really crucial distinction, and the sources provide an academic framework that cuts through the noise. To be classified as strategic disinformation, the kind that poses a threat to democracy, it needs 3 specific components. First, fundamentally, it requires a lie, a demonstrable factual falsehood.
So it's not enough just to be politically incorrect or biased. The core claim has to be factually bankrupt.
Precisely. Second, it has to have intention. There has to be a strategic goal to produce a specific political or social effect.
So the creators have to know it's false.
They have to know it's false, and they have to be aiming to manipulate a target group toward a specific outcome. Like shifting election results or undermining public health efforts. This is what separates strategic warfare from someone just accidentally sharing something.
So if a political operative publishes a false claim about the opposition's voting record, knowing it will suppress turnout in a specific region, that strategic intent immediately elevates it to disinformation.
Correct. And the third element is crucial for it to spread, for mass diffusion. The appearance of truth. It has to be formally presented in a way that looks credible.
Like with professional graphics, or a logo that looks like a real news outlet.
Exactly. Pseudo-media branding, authoritative language, something that allows it to bypass your initial skepticism. It has to look like real content to be shared by real people.
And you have to contrast that with misinformation, right? Which is just false information regardless of the intent behind it. It could be a simple mistake by a citizen or, a sloppy journalist.
Exactly. And then you've got the other category, simple conspiracy theories, like flat earthers or the whole theory about reptilians controlling global finance.
Sure.
Now, while those are objectively absurd and, harmful to rational thought, the sources note they often lack a clear, cohesive, strategic geopolitical intention to destabilize a specific election or a military objective.
But those absurd theories are still destructive, aren't they? Because they contribute to what the sources call the rupture of consensus. If you reject the basic scientific fact that the Earth is round, you are already standing outside the shared reality you need for any kind of democratic discourse.
You've thrown away the rule book.
Right, you've thrown away the rule book before the game even starts.
And that shared reality, what we used to call the public sphere, is exactly what has evaporated over the last decade. Look, disinformation is not new. The Cold War was defined by it. But social media provided an entirely new dimension. It amplified diffusion under conditions that favor the lie.
So we've moved from the public sphere, where we would ideally exchange ideas, into the self-contained filter bubble.
Ah, the Truth a la carte menu, curated just for you.
Just for me.
It's a perfect, tailored reality. The algorithms filter content based heavily on your engagement history and your stated preferences. They're constantly reinforcing your existing cognitive biases. So you aren't just reading news, you are consuming a personalized echo chamber.
Yeah. Which just hammers away at confirmation bias. You're constantly fed information that confirms what you already believe.
And anchoring bias, where you place too much reliance on the first piece of information you see on a topic. So if the algorithm shows you the most extreme version of an issue first, that becomes your baseline.
And then anything more moderate looks suspiciously, liberal or conservative by comparison.
That's the mechanism of radicalization. It's a feedback loop. And to go back to your analogy, it's like standing at a massive fast food menu with infinite options. You logged on looking for general knowledge, maybe a light topic.
That's salad.
You wanted a salad, but the algorithm knows you secretly love the extreme triple bacon outrage burger because you clicked on it twice last month. So it just shows you 40 variations of the outrage burger optimized for maximum clickability.
Even though I just needed a salad.
And you end up scrolling endlessly, consuming the same high-calorie emotional content, and then you wonder why you feel sick and furious.
And that endless scroll reinforces the core economic reality here. In this digital society, attention is the most valuable asset. Your time, your outrage, your eyeballs, that is the commodity being traded for profit. And that makes the strategic use of disinformation a genuine geopolitical weapon.
Precisely. We have clear evidence that modern disinformation campaigns are highly effective at steering political outcomes. I mean, the sources cite the 2016 U.S. presidential election and the Brexit vote, where malicious content was it was everywhere, and it was structured with coordinated intent.
And the threat is constantly evolving, isn't it? It often targets newer, more vulnerable democracies or, critical geopolitical fault lines. The sources highlight a really chilling high-stakes example from Eastern Europe, the 2024 Romanian election.
This case is a textbook example of modern hybrid warfare. It shows what coordinated structural manipulation looks like when it's deployed to achieve strategic geopolitical goals. The Constitutional Court ultimately annulled the results in parts of the election after detecting a massive attributed Russian influence campaign.
What?
And it was targeting the far-right candidate, Calin Georgescu.
The annulment of a national election because of informational interference. That has to be a landmark case in the history of democracy.
It is.
So what was the mechanism of the attack? I mean, beyond just listing the platforms, how did they actually manage to sway enough votes to force that outcome?
The offensive was comprehensive and very resource-intensive. They used multiple vectors at the same time. It involved the mass creation of suspicious, coordinated accounts on platforms like TikTok and Telegram.
Lower barriers to entry, lighter moderation.
Exactly. And the expenditure of over 1 million euros spent on local influencers and micro-influencers to give the messages a kind of organic credibility.
So it wasn't just anonymous bots. They were actually buying trust locally.
Exactly. And they used advanced techniques, including these highly customized bots that were designed to evade the platform's automated detection systems. That allowed them to control the online narratives and the advertising spend without being flagged immediately as foreign interference.
And what was the emotional core of the campaign? Because, as we've established, strategic disinformation leverages intense emotion over dry fact.
It preyed ruthlessly on existential fear and existing war fatigue. The central false narrative, classic boulot, a fake rumor, was designed to sway the youth vote.
Okay.
It claimed that if they didn't vote for Georgescu, young Romanians would be immediately drafted to fight in Ukraine. This narrative capitalized on the proximity to the war and the general population's anxiety.
Fear of conscription that's a powerful primal fear.
They coupled that with narratives that exacerbated social unrest. They spread fake rumors that blamed Ukrainian refugees for rising criminality, for draining public services, and for collapsing the economy. The message wasn't subtle: vote for chaos or face immediate personal destruction.
So the goal wasn't necessarily to present a coherent, appealing alternative leader. It was just to create enough pervasive fear and distrust and chaos that the shared consensus collapses.
And you get the desired strategic and ultimately destabilizing outcome. They fractured the conversation until people only reacted emotionally.
Which is the ultimate goal of strategic disinformation, isn't it? To alter perception so fundamentally that individual and collective self-governance based on shared facts becomes impossible.
And this playbook is not confined to global conflict zones. It's tested everywhere, including, as our sources focus on, in Latin American political processes.
Okay, let's zoom in. Let's go from that massive state-sponsored geopolitical scale to the micro-ecosystem of lies. When we look at real quantitative data from fact-checkers trying to stop this tide, what does the anatomy of a typical political lie actually look like on the ground?
We have some incredibly detailed data from a study that focused on the 2022 and 2023 constitutional plebiscites in Chile. This was a period of intense political polarization.
Perfect test case.
A perfect test case. Fact-checkers like Mala Espinacheck and factcheck.cl verified 237 distinct disinformation cases, and that gives us a statistical blueprint of deception.
And having two distinct national fact-checkers covering the same contentious political moment, that provides some crucial comparative validity.
It does. And the findings are really clear on where the lies are circulating. Overwhelmingly, the primary channel is social media. It accounted for a staggering 85.2% of the cases.
85%.
Traditional media newspapers, broadcast television involved in a tiny fraction of the total.
Which confirms that our problem is fundamentally a platform-centric one, right? It's
Right.
driven by the algorithm's demand for viral sharing, not by the legacy media's editorial decisions.
Absolutely. But within that social media vortex, the origin is perhaps the most concerning factor, especially regarding strategic intent. The vast majority of disinformation, 84%, originates from diffuse sources.
Diffuse sources.
Unidentified, unconfirmed, or unknown.
That statistic is the smoking gun for coordinated, structural, and intentional campaigns. It tells us this isn't random noise. It's organized chaos designed to hide the puppet masters.
The sources that have the strategic intention to break the system.
Ex-
When 84% of the fire can't be traced back to a specific individual or organization, it suggests a well-resourced structural operation dedicated to distorting the information environment while maintaining plausible deniability.
Right.
However, we should note that the remaining 15% of falsehoods are still shared by public figures or institutions, so they're relying on established legitimacy to amplify the hidden, diffuse sources.
And what about the physical format? When they want to lie to travel, what vehicle are they using?
In the Chilean case, the most common format was the image at 39.7%, followed by text at 31.2%, and then video at 25.7%.
And this is where we confirm it. The cheapest lies travel fastest. Images are low cost to produce, quick screenshot, a badly photoshopped meme, a distorted graphic, they're easy to consume, and highly shareable across every platform, from WhatsApp to TikTok.
The efficiency is undeniable. Images require minimal cognitive load from the consumer, which makes them perfect for bypassing critical thinking. Audio and video, conversely, require much greater production resources and more time investment from the user.
So they're low frequent.
Less frequent in the sheer volume of daily lies, yeah.
But the type of deception has to matter more than the format. Are they just fabricating constitutional clauses, or are they twisting real facts with clever presentation?
This is where we use the Wardle and Diraction classification to understand the intent. The two dominant types are misleading content, contenido engañoso, 31.2%, and imposter content, contenido imposter, 21.1%.
Yeah.
This indicates a sort of medium level of intentionality focused on high-stakes political procedures. Specifically, they focus on twisting the procedures of the constitutional processes themselves. that's 43.5% of cases, and general election mechanics, another 31.2%.
Okay, let's be specific. How does misleading content differ practically from imposter content?
Okay, so misleading content takes a real piece of information, a fact, a photo, a quote, and it frames it or edits it to draw a false conclusion. For instance, you could take a true graph showing a slight increase in national debt and then use it with a headline that claims the country is facing imminent bankruptcy.
Even if the actual debt is still manageable.
Right. The information is real, but the conclusion is misleading.
And imposter content.
That is fabrication using the appearance of truth. This is where that third element of disinformation comes in. An example might be creating a document with the official logo of the National Electoral Service and distributing completely false information about voting deadlines or requirements.
So the content is fake, but the template and the authority are stolen. It's an imposter trying to gain trust.
That fits the appearance of truth criteria perfectly. It targets structural systems like elections and official processes, and it creates strategic doubt rather than just simple outrage.
Let's look at a concrete political caricature example, because this case study perfectly illustrates the high-impact use of misleading content.
Right, we have the case of the UDI party's parody video, and it was aimed at the Minister of Education, Nicholas Cataldo.
And this happened during a sensitive political period, right? A potential cabinet reshuffle, a campaign for a key political candidate. The strategic goal was clear: undermine his legitimacy and maybe block a future appointment.
The video was a piece of pure political satire designed to paint the minister as negligent. It claimed he was ignoring critical educational duties, specifically mentioning rising dropout rates and retrocession in reading and math scores, which were real underlying issues.
Okay, so it's based in some truth.
To focus only on political campaigning for the Janet Jara campaign, his character in the video even asks, "Can I send you the answer by signal? I have to check something for the command."
So it takes real data points about educational struggles and then wraps them in this completely fictional, damaging narrative of personal negligence and political prioritization. The overall message is totally misleading, even if individual statistics might be technically verifiable.
And it achieved its strategic goal immediately. The video generated a ton of controversy, with critics calling it bullying and a lack of respect by the minister's allies.
Right.
Even a senator from the UDI party itself, Gustavo Sanguesa, condemned it publicly. He called it a way of ridiculing those who think differently and trivializing politics.
That's telling.
Yeah.
So even the creation of this politically targeted, misleading content generates internal criticism because its strategic effectiveness relies on eroding public civility and trust.
Yeah.
It just shows how low the bar has sunk in political discourse. You're relying on a short, viral caricature to block political momentum.
Absolutely. It's a low-cost, high-impact political strike, using the virality of social media to achieve a measurable political objective, creating structural doubt around a political opponent.
It's depressing.
Yeah.
But the platforms themselves are not just passive hosts for these images and videos. They are, as we established in the introduction, the active engines of radicalization. Let's shift our focus now and look directly at the algorithm's rabbit hole, specifically the mechanism of control wielded by YouTube.
The systemic role of these platforms,
Let's at.
it cannot be overstated. We keep coming back to that statistic. The YouTube recommender system is integrated into the platform's primary structure, and it's directly responsible for 30% of all video views. That is an editorial influence that is just unmatched in history.
30%. That means for every 3 hours you spend watching videos, 1 hour is spent watching content determined by an opaque, engagement-maximizing mechanism. So what does the synthesis of research tell us about what this mechanism is optimizing for?
A systematic review analyzed 23 major studies on this topic, and the synthesis was overwhelmingly conclusive regarding its destructive potential. 14 studies directly implicated the recommender system in facilitating pathways to problematic content.
Like extremism, radicalization, conspiracy theories.
All of it. 7 studies found mixed results, and only 2 found no implication.
So the famous filter bubble effect, which was initially dismissed by some tech executives as a myth, is essentially confirmed by the overwhelming body of academic work. It's not a theory anymore, it's a design feature.
That's right. 9 of the studies explicitly supported the notion that the recommender system creates these self-reinforcing filter bubbles of homogeneous content. It reinforces existing interests and beliefs, even if those beliefs are deeply harmful or extreme.
It finds your bias, validates it, and then deepens it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those pathways. What does it look like when the algorithm takes an innocuous viewer and just guides them down the rabbit hole.
One of the most shocking findings was the low number of steps required to reach highly destructive content from seemingly innocuous starting points. Researchers tracked pathways originating from neutral or benign topics. We're talking about videos about martial arts, fitness training, self-help gurus,
Or building tiny houses.
or even highly specific topics like building tiny houses or gardening. Yes.
So I logged on for information on how to build a shed, and now I'm watching videos about the deep state controlling my home construction materials. How quickly does this happen?
It's rapid. The study focusing on incels, the involuntary celibates, a community rooted in misogyny and extreme violent views tied to perceived societal unfairness, found a concrete, alarming probability of radicalization.
Get this.
There was an 18.8% probability of encountering incel-related content within just 5 steps of starting from a completely benign, unrelated video.
1 in 5 clicks is a horrifying funnel. That is not accidental drift. That is engineered propulsion into extremity.
And it gets significantly more complicated when governments or NGOs try to intervene. Counter messages, anti-extremist material created by legitimate authorities can sometimes be counterproductive.
How?
The research found that the recommender system would often place extremist content within 2 clicks of the counter message video itself.
Wait, let me be sure I understand this cynical mechanism. The platform is using the anti-extremist content, the critique of the movement, as a data point that confirms the user's interest in the movement, and then it uses that interest as a bridge to guide them closer to the extremism it's supposed to be fighting.
That is the horrifying conclusion. If you're watching something related to white nationalism, even if it's a detailed governmental critique of white nationalism, the algorithm just reasons you are engaged in this topic, and it suggests more.
So it puts the critique right next to the most popular extremist response videos.
Which highlights the immense difficulty of intervention when the core mechanism is designed solely for maximizing engagement time.
And this all loops back to the fundamental critique we started with, the supply and demand challenge. We, as researchers, auditors, and citizens, are staring at a completely opaque black box.
Exactly. Researchers face enormous limitations because YouTube, like many platforms, does not fully disclose its algorithms or the ranking metrics. We are trying to reverse engineer a mechanism responsible for controlling the consumption habits of billions of people without the schematic. It's a systemic design of intentional secrecy.
It's like trying to regulate pollution by only looking at air quality reports, while the factory that produces the pollution is legally allowed to keep its operating procedures completely secret.
And many studies are forced to use simplified models like basic random walk algorithms, which are useful for general patterns, but they fail to account for a crucial hidden factor: user personalization. The algorithmic black box is informed by your interactions with every other Google product, your search history, your email, your location data. That is the layer of deep personal data that ensures the recommendations are acutely tailored to reinforce your specific, deepest biases.
And that just accelerates radicalization far beyond what simplified academic models can capture.
And this is where the intellectual nihilism kicks in, isn't it? We are living in a world where the mechanisms responsible for pushing extremist or violent ideologies are intentionally hidden from audit. And that secrecy is protected by massive legal and financial walls.
Mirroring the opaqueness of old power structures like central banks, but targeting sanity instead of solvency.
And the cost is not just polarization, it's real-world tragedy. The sources remind us of the case of Buckley Wolf, the 26-year-old man in Seattle who murdered his brother with a sword because he believed his brother was a shape-shifting alien reptile.
A truly catastrophic, high-stakes manifestation of algorithmic dissent, moving from paranoia to violence.
A journalist investigated Wolf's viewing habits. He started with innocuous content, martial arts, fitness. But his viewing history eventually shifted dramatically toward alt-right figures, then deep-cut conspiracy theories, and ultimately alt-right white nationalist content.
So we can't say the algorithm caused the violence?
We can't say it caused it, but it certainly accelerated the pathways to that destructive worldview. It ensured he found a community and an endless stream of content, validating his increasingly fractured grip on reality.
So the algorithm controlled his anger, escalated his paranoia, and eventually fractured his grip on reality to the point of murder. And the people who wrote the code for this process are the ones who are shielded from accountability by the black box design.
That is the nature of the crisis. It operates at scale, hidden from scrutiny, and with measurable real-world consequences on polarization and trust.
Okay, so the algorithms are actively fracturing reality and pushing us toward extremism. That's the problem. Now let's shift to the supposed solution we've collectively built to fight the lies. The fact-checkers. Who watches the watchmen, and how effective is their white knight approach against this systemic black box problem?
Fact-checking is a relatively recent phenomenon. It really gained steam in the political sphere around 2000, pioneered by factcheck.org in 2003. By 2015, the International Fact-Checking Network, or IFCN, emerged as a central body to verify these initiatives.
Yeah, and they use criteria like impartiality, transparency, accountability.
Right. The IFCN essentially tries to standardize the truth industry. It's like a global ISO certification for factual accuracy,
Which you'd think would be a good thing.
in theory. And their methodologies are critical. Looking again at the Chilean examples, the two most used verification methods reveal the practical difficulty of checking information in the age of viral images. Fact-checkers rely heavily on reverse image search
Búsqueda inversa.
at 38.4%, and review of official documents revision to documentos at 38.8%. They also use expert consultation and source checking.
The reliance on reverse image search is so telling. It shows that the bulk of their work isn't reading legislation. It's confirming whether that picture of a politician looking ridiculous is real, or whether that infographic claiming X is a genuine official publication.
It reflects the dominant format of deception we discussed, the low-cost, high-impact image. Interestingly, the methodology varied between the two organizations. Mala Spinacek favored consulting external experts more heavily, which indicates a focus on complex policy, while FastCheck.TL prioritized reverse image searching and consulting original primary sources.
This diversity in approach highlights the complexity of trying to verify claims that span everything from viral propaganda to deep policy statistics. But, as we noted, the real stress test for fact-checkers isn't their methodology.
It's their neutrality.
It's their neutrality. If citizens don't trust the verifier, the verification is just another piece of disregarded opinion.
And we have a crucial study from Spain investigating the IFCN-certified fact-checker Neutral, specializing in political discourse. They covered 4 years of checking activity from late 2018 to late 2022.
Okay.
The study broke down the fact-checking process into 3 key phases. 1, selection of statements. 2, execution, which is the checking of sources and evidence. And 3, resolution, the final verdict.
And what did they find regarding the actual checking process, the execution and resolution phases? Did bias creep into the final judgment?
This is the surprising finding that pushes back against common criticisms of bias. On the phases of execution and resolution, the final verdict of true, false, or misleading, the study found no significant differences or ideological biases across political parties or ideologies, left or right.
That is a critical data point. It suggests that fact-checking as an institutional process can be fair. So if a claim by a left-wing politician and an identical claim by a right-wing politician are checked, the methodology and the final verdict are statistically neutral.
Yes. And this directly contrasts with some U.S. studies that suggest a progressive bias, where PolitiFact, for example, labeled conservatives false significantly more often.
So the institutional act of checking is neutral.
It is. However, the study uncovered a major red flag, a certain selection bias in the initial phase.
The opaque subjective part.
Yeah.
What they choose to check. The filtering mechanism for the fact-checkers themselves.
Precisely. The study found that Neutral paid greater attention to conservative parties, specifically checking the discourse of the Partido Popular more frequently than other political groups. This focus was particularly sharp toward their former president, Pablo Casado.
Wow.
He received nearly half the denials related to major leaders in the sample.
This is the ultimate cynical realization for those trying to restore trust. The scales of justice are perfectly balanced, but the agenda, who is forced to stand on the scales in the first place, is still set by something subjective.
Right.
So why did this selection bias occur? Was it an intentional targeting, or simply that conservative figures generated more content that required verification?
That is the central, unanswered question this study leaves us with. Future work needs to determine if this selection bias is due to, the fact-checker's editorial preference, or if conservative figures were simply making more verifiable or more inaccurate statements during the study period.
Or maybe just a response to perceived higher public interest or higher virality of those specific claims.
It could be.
But regardless of the cause, the effect is corrosive. You can be the fairest referee on the planet, but if you only call penalties on one team, you're still impacting the outcome and undermining your own perceived legitimacy.
You can't tell a voter, relax, we just focused 60% of our effort on debunking your guy, but trust us, we were impartial when we did it.
Exactly.
It challenges their perceived neutrality, which is democracy's currency. It makes the job of rebuilding shared consensus infinitely harder, because even the supposed solution to the trust crash struggles with a perception problem rooted in opacity and selection criteria.
All right, let's pivot. Let's go from the problem, which is the opaque algorithms, and the flawed solution, the fact-checkers grappling with perception, to what institutions and governments are actually doing globally to fight back against this structural trust crash.
Institutional responses are vital, and it's acknowledging that passivity is just not an option. I mean, we've established that disinformation is a powerful, calculated weapon. Repeating a lie makes it seem true, and that severely alters public perception and threatens democratic stability.
So what measures are we seeing deployed, particularly in regions that have recently faced this kind of high-stakes political manipulation?
Chile, following its intense constitutional plebiscites, established an advisory commission against disinformation in 2023. Their focus areas show an evolution beyond simple fact-checking towards structural resilience.
So they're targeting the architecture, not just the individual lies.
Right. They focus on regulating digital platforms, implementing sound public policy, and mandatory digital literacy. And they're working in coordination with major international bodies like the OECD and the UN.
And the European Union, which has massive market and regulatory power, is putting serious resources into defending the information space.
The EU approach is defined by massive financial backing for research. They're emphasizing an equilibrated perspective to safeguard freedom of expression while tackling large-scale information manipulation.
And they're channeling this through major research programs like Horizon Europe,
which demonstrates that they view this as a threat requiring fundamental scientific and technical defense.
Give us a few examples of the scale and the technical specificity of this funding, because this isn't a small awareness campaign budget.
No, these are multi-million euro projects aimed at developing advanced defenses. For example, the AI Code project received 5 million euros. Its goal is to develop AI services specifically to help media professionals, journalists, and editors detect new, sophisticated forms of content manipulation.
Like subtle textual or visual alterations that humans miss.
Exactly. It's an AI defense system for the newsroom.
So professional reporters get technical tools to spot the digital ghosts we can't see. What about the ordinary citizen?
That's where AI for Debunk comes in, receiving 4.9 million euros. Its goal is to create human-centered AI interfaces, web plugins, collaborative apps, even augmented reality interfaces designed to help citizens navigate digital media safely.
The goal is real-time detection and verification tools accessible to the average person,
providing instant context to potentially false content.
So that is moving beyond telling people after the fact that they were lied to and giving them the tools to detect the manipulation in real time at the point of consumption.
And looking forward, the ultimate challenge is the rise of generative AI. The Solaris project received 3 million euros to analyze and develop strategies against ultra-falsification.
Ultra-falsification.
Yeah.
That sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. What exactly are we fighting here?
We're fighting hyper-accurate fake media created by generative adversarial networks, or GANs. These are AI models that create incredibly realistic fake images, audio, and video, also known as deepfakes. Ultra-falsification means the synthetic content is so perfect it's indistinguishable from reality, which makes traditional reverse image searching useless.
So we're talking about high-fidelity video of a politician giving a speech they never gave, or a perfect audio recording of a sensitive conversation that never happened, all generated instantly and deployed strategically in the final days of an election.
Exactly. The Solaris project focuses on developing digital forensics and source tracing technology to determine the provenance of media. Where did this image actually come from, instead of relying on trying to spot the subtle imperfections of the fake itself?
It's an arms race against synthetic reality.
It is.
So if regulation and funding are addressing the platform and the technical side, what about addressing the individual citizen? How do you rewire a brain that has been optimized for outrage and confirmation bias by a hidden algorithm for years?
Policy needs to focus on algorithmic changes that maximize individual resilience without incurring the risk of censorship. And this is where inoculation theory comes in, which is a promising area of behavioral science study.
Inoculation, like a cognitive vaccine for the mind, preparing the immune system before the virus hits.
The metaphor is incredibly apt. Inoculation strategies equip individuals to resist persuasion by teaching them to recognize rhetorical deficiencies and logical fallacies before they even encounter the disinformation.
So you train the user to spot the process of lying, rather than just telling them this specific post is false. What specific rhetorical deficiencies are they teaching people to recognize?
The training focuses on generic tactics of manipulation. For example, teaching people to recognize the use of extreme emotional language designed to trigger an immediate, non-rational response.
Spotting straw man arguments.
Spotting straw man arguments, where an opponent's position is grossly misrepresented to make it easier to attack, and recognizing scapegoating, which involves blaming a single external group for all complex problems.
That's fascinating. You are essentially training the public to be high-level critical thinkers, regardless of the content's political slant.
And studies demonstrate that brief, 5-minute inoculation videos can effectively increase participants' resistance to disinformation. For instance, participants were significantly less likely to share Islamophobic content and perceived the misinformation as less reliable after receiving this inoculation training.
So it's an effective way to strengthen the first line of defense at the psychological level.
It is.
Which brings us to the hardest, most necessary part of the equation: digital literacy. The citizen is the first and last line of defense. But that defense requires constant vigilance and training. We have to turn this inoculation into a foundational skill.
It does, and the source material highlights that this requires mandatory digital literacy training, starting within the formal educational system, primary and secondary schools. This shouldn't be an elective. It should be as foundational as reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Which is currently lacking in so many developed nations, meaning citizens are sent into the world's most complex information ecosystem with virtually no formal training in how the mechanisms of control, especially the black box algorithms, actually work.
We are asking citizens to navigate a high-stakes, hyper-personalized reality war with an informational skill set fit for the 1990s. The gap between the threat and the defense mechanism at the individual level is the greatest weakness in democratic resilience today.
It seems like the only thing growing faster than the strategic diffusion of misinformation is the desperate multi-million euro industry dedicated to fighting it.
A booming but existential market, and a constant state of alert is the price of living in a hyper-optimized information age.
Okay, let's summarize what we've unpacked in this first heavily expanded episode of The Trust Crash. We dove into the modern structure of opaque power, replacing the old, analog secret societies controlling our money.
With the new opaque algorithmic regimes controlling our anger and attention, we established that this powerful hidden code governs what we see and what we believe. The data from Chile shows us that strategic disinformation is highly organized, it favors cheap formats like images, and it originates mostly from diffuse, meaning coordinated and hidden sources.
And we saw that the very engine of virality, the YouTube recommender system, is demonstrably leading users down radicalizing rabbit holes in pathways that are incredibly fast and impossible to audit because the mechanisms are intentionally black-boxed.
With real catastrophic human consequences.
And finally, we examined the supposed solution, the fact-checkers. We found that while their internal process is often ideologically neutral, their selection criteria, what they choose to scrutinize, can introduce a bias that challenges their perceived legitimacy, eroding the very public trust they were created to restore.
Yeah.
So here's the provocative thought for you to carry forward, the core dilemma that defines the trust crash. If social media usage can be shown to cause anti-democratic effects like increased polarization, fragmented perception, and violence, then the central threat isn't just about sharing a fake image or a politician being deceptive.
It's deeper.
It's the fact that these digital platforms are actively selling us versions of reality that are tailored not just for personal profit, but to fundamentally fracture the shared consensus needed for democracy itself. They are trading your sanity for their revenue.
We've gone from the information superhighway to the information archipelago, and the islands of belief are getting further apart every single day.
An essential, terrifying truth. Thank you for sharing your sources with us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Next time on The Deep Dive, we'll continue our series, The Trust Crash, and look closer at the consequences of these fractured realities, how the intentional diffusion of emotional conflict has led us to the inflation of lies and fragmented reality. We will look at how the continuous supply of outrage diminishes the value of actual truth.
Prepare for hyperinflation of the absurd. The currency of coherence is collapsing.
Until then, stay skeptical and stay alert.